All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you had a good first weekend. Are we as energized as we were the first week? I don't sense it. I'm not getting that sense. Hope you had a good weekend. Mine was interesting. I had a family member die, and I'm going to have to go to Texas this coming weekend, but I'm here. My dad was going to move into my house. Just wait. You guys have those kinds of choices. And then it turns out he's not. So I've gone through an emotional ringer this weekend, mostly because, man, can you imagine? I mean, some of you still live with your parents, right? Imagine getting away and then coming back and going that full circle. So I am thrilled to be here right now, and not dealing with all of those things, but that's coming this weekend for me. So enough about me. I hope you guys did have a good first weekend of this semester. So if we could look up here, just look at what our system is for each week, and that is that hopefully before class on our first day, you've read the chapter. So I'm hoping you've read chapter 2. And then if you would, before class, next class, read the articles under reading assignment. Remember what we did in class, last class, right? Where you answer some questions. Make sure you do that so we can make that really valuable next class. And then you've got notes for both of the classes this week, a quiz, and then a writing assignment. How many do you have to do for the writing assignments? 10, right? And there are 15 of them. So you choose which ones. Now, something a little different this week is that if you've done the writing assignment 1, there isn't really anything debatable about that. And so the peer discussions are going to be things that are debatable. And so if you do the writing assignment, then you need to do the peer discussion along with it. You can't do the peer discussion without the writing assignment. Although this one, I might give you some leeway if you really want to get some points here for this, because I think this is really useful for you all to think about in the beginning of your college careers or near the beginning, or as you're thinking about what you're going to do with your degree. So if you would look at this, I'll try to make this larger so it's easier to read, but read over number 1 here. I want us all to start our notes today with this. I want to start, whether or not you're doing the peer discussion, I want you to write this down. Not this question, but your very unique thoughts on this. So if you need to reread this, and I'll summarize in a second here. So we were going to have a guitar contest in here, right? Remember that discussion about specialization? So this now, setting aside the guitar contest that may or may not happen at some point, I mean, you need to be aware that in your college career, you're hopefully specializing in something like these gentlemen have specialized in the guitar. And so what exactly is that? I really like the saying that I've quoted here from the military, which is plan your work and work your plan. If you don't have a plan, then you don't know what you're really spending your time doing. And I want you to at least start conceptualizing what is your plan, what is your major, what is it that is the area that you're going to become a specialist in, and then make decisions based on that. But not having that plan kind of leaves you a little aimless through this college experience that you're engaging in. So take a few minutes here. I want you to write down some thoughts. As you're writing, I just want to say something else that might lead you in another direction. Do you guys know who Draymond Green is? Yeah. Basketball player, right? So I listen to his podcast sometimes. And in his podcast the other day, he talked about holding yourself accountable, and that's how he got to be great. And his coach in college, Tom Izzo, I think it's Tom Izzo, had taught him about keeping himself accountable and then addressing those things. So in other words, when you have something that you haven't done as well as you're capable of, or as well as you need to do, you need to address that. So where are the areas you need to hold yourself accountable on? Are there areas like myself, when I was in college, I was deathly afraid of speaking in front of people. So I held myself accountable and got a lot of practice doing that. So I feel less deathly afraid. Do you have those kinds of issues? Because that kind of ability is something a lot of careers require. So how are you going to hold yourself accountable and try to level up your skills in those areas that might be lacking? How are you going to be not entirely like Draymond Green and do technical fouls all the time, but do things around holding oneself accountable. You would, let's continue with our notes. We're going to go back to kind of more formal note taking. But what I do every semester, I don't know if you need to know this, but I like to keep things fresh for myself. And so I change up my lectures a little bit. So hopefully what I present to you today is going to be a little bit more interactive than I have in the past, this chapter, and engages you and teaches you a little bit more. So if we would start with this. Normally it doesn't show that screen, does it? Right? All right, so policies and systems, one of these things you should already know. So macroeconomics is something we've looked at before, and let's look at this formula again. So here we're looking at the entire nation's economy, and we're looking at what makes it tick. What makes it tick in terms of our gross domestic product, so all things that are bought or sold in our country. And this side, this is all the buying side. And so what do you remember about this? You remember C? Who is that? That's us, by the way. This is personal consumption. So this is you and me. How much of our economy do you think is consumption related? The American economy, what percent of our economy is based on you and I, our families, individuals buying stuff? Yeah. Perfect. Wow. That's excellent. Well, no, it's a little bit less than 70%, but you get full credit for that. Yeah, it's about 70% of our economy. And it's dependent upon how much money we have to spend on taxes. Do you remember we put something next to taxes to say something about its relationship to spending? Like if your taxes go up, what's going to happen to people's spending? Is it going to go up or go down? Down. So what kind of relationship do we have between that and that? Negative relationship. So if you would, in your notes, put a negative sign there above taxes. Interest rates that are continuing to go up. Stock market went up Friday, went down another 1,000 points because the chairperson of the Federal Reserve, who's in charge of these decisions, said we're going to keep raising interest rates to snuff out runaway prices, in other words, inflation. And so what is he trying to do? Raise prices. So what happens to consumption? Goes down? Yeah, goes down. So there's another negative there, put a negative above lowercase I there. And while we're at it, do the same thing above taxes and interest rates over here. I'm going to add this just to annotate my notes as well. The negative sign there, 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 and there. And remember what this means. If any of these variables go up, then the dependent variable, consumption or investment, go down. So capitalized investment, this is key to the future of our economy. Right now, economists are trying to determine whether or not we are in a recession or heading towards a recession. By the way, I heard some talk in the teachers' lounge this morning about our enrollments being lower. What do we think about recessions? What do we as teachers and an institution like Butte College, when a country, or more importantly for us, our county falls into recession and people lose jobs, how is that for us as an institution? Does that help us or hurt us? What do you think? Feels like it hurts, right? But we are counter-cyclical. So the business cycle, the cycle of our economy growing and shrinking. In fact, when our economy shrinks and people lose their jobs, what do? Some of them. They come to Butte College, right? So we are counter-cyclical. When the economy goes down, Butte College goes up. So as our economy right now has really low unemployment, notice this class is packed. In recessions, and I've worked here during recessions, these classrooms are packed because people don't have that opportunity cost, meaning from chapter 2, right? Coming to college, they're not giving up a job because they can't find a job, right? But when we're in a recession, people realize, okay, I can't find a job. I'm coming to upgrade my skills right here, right now. What's another counter-cyclical industry? When the economy goes down, people buy more of this thing. What do people buy to soothe their worries? What do you think? Alcohol. Alcohol is a counter-cyclical industry. As the economy goes down, alcohol sales actually go up. Maybe not the best choice for somebody who's unemployed, using their money for that, but that's just a fact that I'm saying these things to say that you're going to want to know, as most of you, I imagine, are business majors, is your industry pro-cyclical, meaning it grows when the economy grows, or is it counter-cyclical? And that's a really important thing to know. And in this class, throughout the whole semester of learning, what are those indicators so I know where the economy is going in the future so I can plan? So the indicator right now we're looking at is, are businesses spending their money to invest in themselves? And if they start pulling back on that, we are definitely headed into a recession. G is government spending, X is exports, meaning the stuff we sell overseas, M is imports. Tell me why that's negative. So this is all the money spent in our economy. And when we buy something from overseas, we get that thing, but what's leaving? What's the negative? Yeah, our money, US dollars are leaving the country. So that's why we have a negative there. Right, so now, so here's the system of macroeconomics. Now policies. So on our first, here we go. So fiscal policy. We're going to be learning detail after detail about fiscal policy all the way into the last week of this class. But the top line, headline, second week of class is to know that this involves either government spending, changes in government spending, and how much we tax people and who we tax. At the state level, who determines this? California state government. Who determines what we spend and what we tax? There's a guy that people have loved to hate during COVID. Gavin Newsom, who is our governor. And then who else? He signs bills that come from, you know this? Just shy to say it. The state legislature and the state senate. Do we get to vote for those people? Okay, good. We know that. Excellent. So we know we're in a democracy. Just making sure. Now on the federal level, which this class covers, I want you to write this down. For these things, this is our, who's the top person? President. And then, okay, help me out. Just had your senior year, a lot of you. I know online, you have the president who signs the bill, who sends the bills to the president. Congress, which is made up of the House and the Senate. Okay, oh wait, we're going to do some basics here. I can just see this. It's been either lost or not learned. How many senators does each state get? 2. Okay, we're getting there. So how many states are there in the United States? There are how many senators? 100. Okay, every state has different districts. Each district is made up of about 500,000 people. Our district is California District 1, represented by Doug LaMalfa. He is our House representatives. Any idea how many we have of those? A harder question. No, there's a 3 in there. So I'll give you some credit. Yes. 435. That's my understanding. Yeah, 435. And so you add those two together, those two bodies. So if you would, let's write this down. Let's be thorough here. So this is based on what the Senate passes, what the House passes, and what the president. And I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to call President POTUS. POTUS is President of the United States. When I worked overseas for the government, I worked on a FLOTUS visit. FLOTUS, anybody? First Lady, yeah. I worked on Hillary Clinton's detail, worked with one of her aides that then became, I don't know if you guys heard about Anthony Weiner and his laptop and all of his goofiness. I met his wife. Wonder what would have happened if I would have asked her out then. I never thought of that. Sorry. So those 3 decide fiscal policy, who we tax, how much we tax, government spending, what we spend it on, and if we cut it or not, or don't cut it. Something we're going to get to, so I'm just deciding how much detail to give you at this point. We're going to get to the reality that our government spending is consistently higher than our taxes. What does that mean if your spending is higher than your income? Because taxes are income to the government. It means debt. So we're consistently going into debt each year. We've been doing this for decades now. You will hear from some people, is this an awful problem? What's your gut feeling? Is this a big problem to be going into debt? Is it for you if you continue to go into debt? Yes. Now for a nation, is it always a terrible thing? Feels like it is. But the government can do something really weird that we're going to get into later, and that is it can print money. Can you print money? Right? We can't print money. The government can print money. And so it can go into debt, print money, and then buy up its own debt. And so during COVID, our federal government got rid of $5 trillion in debt by just printing money and buying up that debt from the public. $5 trillion debt gone away. So here's just a side question. Instead of doing that, should they have given us $5 trillion? Just send out checks to everybody. What would be the problem with that? What if they did that? It sounds nice. Any thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, inflation would be so much worse than it is right now. Right now, it'd be at 20%, it'd be out of control. So more on those kinds of strange little tricks later in the semester. Right. Monetary policy is this Federal Reserve Bank. Is this institution that is governmental, but we don't elect these people. They're appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. So let's write in our notes. Federal Reserve Bank. And what we're going to call this in the future, we're just going to call it the Fed. I had a student all last semester call it the Feds. You know what that means? And I kept on telling him, like, if the Feds come for me right now, what does that mean? Yeah, the FBI, right? This is not the FBI, right? You don't want the Feds coming after you. This is the Fed, meaning the Federal Reserve Bank, who print our money and to decide how much money is available to us. I was in San Francisco, last weekend, and drove by on Market and Castro, a mint. There's a US mint there. You know what they do? They make money. They print money there. Incredible ability to do something like that. Also incredible security. If you've seen that building, layers and layers of security around it for obvious reasons. Okay, so this semester, we're going to get into incredible detail around these two policies. Today, we're not. Just some introductory comments about them. So now I want to do a little history and then bring you into this discussion a little bit about different systems of economics. I mentioned this more in microeconomics, that is different ways of looking at how we can solve economic problems. But I want to bring some of this in and bring in some different points of view. So the first kind of economic system that we had as a planet was what we call traditional. And everything that was made, and I should say all goods and services, were private. Individuals did them, and they were local. Think of this: no stores, no government, just you, your land, and your neighbors and your family with their land. Does that sound good to anybody? Anybody want to go back in time, 150 years? Well, we do have time machines, and time machines are airplanes. And so, as I said to you, I got back just a week ago from Colombia. Here's a picture of one of the mountainsides outside of Medellin. Tried to get the highest quality resolution here, so maybe you could see something. Notice here's some houses along the mountainside, and those are banana and coffee orchards. And these are people who live very, very simple lives. I'll show you one of their homes. Here's right along the road. This was made. I saw hundreds of people remaking these with just bricks from local mud, and then importing some rebar, some metal from somewhere else. Living very private, very local economies. I tried not to be too obvious and go in front of somebody's house taking pictures of. They thought their federales were coming after them, right? So I wanted to be on the side when I took these pictures. And I don't like taking pictures of people without their consent. That seems a little exploitative. Anyhow, I think hopefully what these pictures, and I took them with this in mind, you can see just the simpleness of their living. And the fact that you're just on this steep hill right here, this person here and their family is farming up and down this hill, bananas and coffee, and they're living a very, very simple traditional life. If they need something, they're likely getting it from someone next door, from a family member, or going into a small town. Any takers? Anybody want to go back to this? You? Yeah. I live up in Cohasset on 40 acres. I grow a huge garden, not what you're thinking. And I love that kind of simple life, right? It's hard work, but it pays off. But if I was to just live like that, if you were to just live like that, we are making a choice to live like that. And like that, I mean relative poverty, right? And then comes the question, well, what do riches get us, right? What does my 2 cars give me? What does my ability to fly give me? And I'd like to say some happiness and contentment and maybe some resources I can give to others. But I also know just anecdotally that these people are pretty dang happy. There's something about their connected lives to their family, to the land, that's pretty special. I don't think any of us, though, want to press, as a whole society, right? Maybe you and me, want to press rewind and go back to this, right? That's why I mean that kind of flying to other countries is a time machine. So here's what I want you to write down an answer to this question, and no more vacation photos, right? I'm going to subject you to that. So I don't have to write this, but I want you to write an answer to this question. Karl Marx, socialists, communists, in their philosophy of history, they think something really screwed up happened. What happened was we moved away from that traditional way of being. That's the most natural way to be, is to live in connection to land. You make your good, and there's no money, right? They had this big debate about whether you should even have money. So you make your coffee, you grow your bananas. Somebody else, I saw a lot of cattle farms. They make the milk. I saw other places where people are farming fish. And so everybody makes what they make and then brings it to market and exchanges it. Does that feel natural to you? Does that feel like human beings, where humans should be? Because to a Marxist, they'd say that leaving that is what's caused all of our troubles. All of our social troubles have been caused by moving away from that natural state of humanity. Question number 1, is that true? What do you think about that? Question number 2, does it, as I was saying earlier, do you think that can create some more happiness? Where do you find some truth in that statement, that living close to the land and knowing everyone else who's providing you everything else? Because, you and I, we go to the store, we're in this kind of disembodied thing where we just pull something off the shelf and not thinking about all the connections behind what we just pulled off the shelf. Do you think it would bring some happiness to know the person you're getting your fish, your milk from when you're trading your stuff? So just a sentence or two. What do you think about? What's your thought on this? I'm not trying to turn you into Marxists, but I am a college professor trying to make you think, right? And the only way you can improve a system is to think about, well, what are the alternatives and where do they have some truth and where do they not have some truth? Where's the truth and where's the place where you just say, nah, I don't buy it at all? Write something.
The next evolution in our economic system, or from some perspectives, devolution, right? If you take that Marxist approach of believing that humans were at their most natural state and they're most happy when they were in a traditional system, making a good, growing the banana, the coffee, and then not using money, but trading it with other people, creating relationships with other people to get the other things that you need, we move away from that towards a market-based system. And the market-based system is one that is only private sector, no government involvement, only private parties making things. But here we're in a market-based system where you actually have that thing called money. And money allows transactions to happen in ways that move us away from the traditional system of barter, where you're exchanging some of your corn or your banana for some wheat or some milk from a neighbor or a clan member. We're moving towards having some intermediary, this thing called money. And we'll certainly spend a lot of time on the philosophy and the mechanics of how a money system works. And when we move to a market-based system, we move to a system of one where some people might have more power than others. And if we look back in history from moving from a traditional system where people did not use money and simply made things with the land or their livestock and traded them, we then moved to an era in history where worldwide there were no real governments or police forces, and life was, as one philosopher said, nasty, short, and brutish at the time, brutal lives without order. And so people found order from that chaos and looking to lords, looking to those that had wealth and power and strength. And they were what were known as lords of manors. This was the manor system. This was when people voluntarily gave themselves up to be serfs, quasi-slavery, so they could be safe under the protection of the lord in the castle, but they gave up their freedom, and part of their work product would go to him in all cases in that time. And so this leads us to the reality that in a market system, the benefits tend to accrue or accumulate at the top. And I just want you to take a second and write down, is that okay? Is it, as we're going to discuss in this class, and as a student once remarked in one of my previous classes, do we have a it sucks to be you system? That is a system where if you haven't benefited, well, it sucks to be you, but I'm going to do my best. And if you don't do well, tough. Do the benefits of our system need to be spread more equally? Or is it okay for them to just accrue to those who are birthed into families with the social capital, with the knowledge of how to succeed in college and in the corporate world, or with the money and finances to succeed? It's okay that they succeed and those without don't. What's your feeling about a system that only allows the lucky and the talented to do well? Take a moment and answer that question. Pause, if you would, to answer that question, then press play to keep going. And so what I'm trying to do in explaining these economic systems that were outlined in our book is to give you a very, very brief summary of economic history. We move towards a system where it's not just the private sector, but the public sector. And so the public sector, you need to know, is the government, where both we get our goods and services from grocery stores who buy their goods from other private suppliers, but there are other things we get from the public sector, like free K-12, if not K-14 education, as the first 2 years of Duke College is free to many of our students now. And so some things like police and fire protection, some things like education, and to some extent healthcare, are provided by the government. And then other things are food, and most of our jobs are provided through the private sector. And so don't write this. This is going to be a question for the rest of our semester. And I was going to spend more time on it, but I'm going to leave this be for now, is that the government is seen as a leveler, to level the playing field so that the benefits don't just accrue to the very top. But how much does the government need to intervene in markets to do this? I think everyone in most classes I teach would agree that indeed we do need public education. We do need public fire protection, public roads. But then the big debate in our society is, how far does that go? How much government intervention is necessary to make a market system that's inherently going to be unfair a little bit more fair? And the answer to all this, according to Marxists, was that you need to get rid of the private sector entirely, that private business only helped accrue wealth and power to the small few. And so the answer to them was that everything should be owned by the government, what they would call the people, that everyone owns the means of production. Everyone owns the factories. The government is in control. And in that way, everything could be divided out in a more equal way. Now, I happen to really enjoy reading Marxist critique of American capitalism and capitalism worldwide. I think it's a fascinating lens through which to look at a society and critique it. The reality is we have not seen communism or Marxism, named after the founder of communism, Karl Marx. We've not seen it work. Nowhere on the planet have we seen it successfully demonstrated. Because, in my opinion, It relies upon people working hard, not for a greater reward, but working hard so that things can be made and services can be provided to society as a whole. People work hard because they know it's important for not necessarily people they know, but for people across their society. And even if I'm working in a factory next to somebody who isn't working very hard, and I make just as much as them, they make just as much as me. I'm going to still work hard because I'm doing this not just for myself, I'm doing this for society. Well, it seems like a command economy relies upon human beings being generous, altruistic, being motivated by what would help others rather than just help themselves. And unfortunately, that's just not true, it seems. The evidence seems to show that people are very self-interested. We are motivated when there are rewards. And we're not motivated to just help society. We're motivated to help someone we know and love, but not society as a whole. So the answer was to have the public sector in charge of everything in total control of all the economy, of every sector in the economy. And so really the question now for us, for every country around the planet, is number 3. How do we perfect this mixed economy? Because every country is mixed. Even communist China is largely private sector. How much does the government intervene in markets? We are not a purely market-based system. Very few would say we need to go all the way back to a market-based system. And as discussed earlier, very few people would want to go back to the land and live in a traditional system. So the question now for every country on the planet is, how do we perfect this mixed market economy? And how is the government a leveler? How can it best be used? And that's a subject for the rest of our semester. Which leads us to our first economic model, our first way of conceptualizing how an economy works. To understand some basic realities, some of the math and analysis behind that, and then some of the implications for what we should do as a nation to make things better off for more people. This production possibilities frontier is also called a production possibilities curve. And it involves some assumptions. We need assumptions if we're going to make a model around human beings, because human beings are very unpredictable. And so some things we need to hold constant. So one thing we need to hold constant is that in our analysis, we have an economy that's working efficiently, that it's at full employment. And full employment for our purposes means that we have 5% unemployment. So please add that to your notes. Full employment means 5% unemployment, not 0% unemployment. Economists actually consider it important for there to be some unemployed, because some people need to go to school, right, and want to go to school to gain more productivity and skills. And so they're going to leave their old job and go to a new job. We want people to feel that if a job isn't fully using their skills, they can quit and go to a job that's using their skills, so the economy can be more productive, more efficient, and using what skills people have. We want people to be happy. And so we want there to be some unemployment, which shows that people are confident enough to leave a job that they know they can find a better job. Next, we're looking at a moment in time. This is a snapshot in time. We're looking at an economy that's running efficiently, and then the resources it uses are fixed in quantity and quality. There's a certain number of resources, a certain number of natural resources, or what we'll abbreviate as land, or L. So one of the things you need over time to grow an economy is more natural resources. Where President Biden stopped the construction of some pipelines that brought natural resources in the form of oil from Canada to the United States. He also, with Congress, passed a bill recently and signed it that's going to give more money for power plants to use more renewable energies. So on one hand, he's taking away some natural resource availability, and on the other hand, providing more and incentives to use wind and solar, resources that are currently not being used. And so an economist's work would be to determine what's the impact of that. How much of the closing of a pipeline will be outweighed by the opening of the usage of more sun and wind? And what will the economic effects be of that? The next is our labor resources, our human resources, our skills. So not only the number of people, but how skilled those people are. And we have a acronym for them, KSAs. What are people's knowledge, skills, and abilities? Knowledge, skills, and abilities. KSAs. What was I asking you at the beginning of class? I was asking you in the beginning of class, where are those items that, what are those things that you're working on as a student in college and outside of school to become more specialized, to gain more knowledge, skills, and abilities so that you can be a more productive worker, so you can, remember the adage, as I told you last week, that I learned in high school of someone saying you earn the amount of money that's commensurate or that is equal to the number and complexity of the problems that you solve in a given day. And how do you solve complex and many problems? Well, you have a lot of KSA, a good deal of knowledge, skills, and abilities. Approach your work, approach your classes, approach your life in this realm, in the economic realm, from this understanding and this pursuit of what exactly is the knowledge, skills, and ability set that I'm looking for to succeed in what I want to succeed in. And then we have capital goods. I often just abbreviate this as tech, right? Tools, equipment, machinery, but I could add software and computers, things that make other things. So in any endeavor, whenever we make anything, it's made with human input at some point, natural resource input at some point, and some sort of piece of equipment. And while in the future, we will abbreviate land as L, we'll abbreviate labor as L, we don't want to abbreviate capital as C. We don't want to abbreviate capital as C because if you look up here, C is already taken, right? C is already consumption spending on the demand side of our economy. So we will be abbreviating this with what does it take to grow an economy? It takes more land, labor, and capital, K for capital, as a common usage for economists. So we're now creating a model where there are two goods being produced. And so now let's draw this first model. This first model, like all of them, is going to measure something along a vertical and a horizontal axis, along a y-axis and an x-axis. And what we're going to measure is we're going to measure our level of capital goods. So our tools, equipment, tech, things that help us make other things, and along our X, consumer goods.
And what we're looking here at is a country's ability to make one or the other. I'm going to draw a bowed out curve here. I'm going to skip past that last thing there. So note what the convention is here, only write down things that are in red. So here's this graphical representation of choices that we have in a society. We can make a certain amount of capital goods, we can make a certain amount of consumer goods, and our choices lie along this curve. And so now, let me just move this. Let's look at some of these things. Then we're going to talk about how this relates to international trade, do our first kind of math and conceptual analysis. So here, do write this. So the points on the curve represent the maximum we can produce with our current level of technology and our current level of resources. So I'm going to do 2 points here. I'm going to call them A and B. So also transcribe these onto your notes. Is that the only place? Can I only draw A and B, or are there more places than that? Society with all its resources could produce only big tools and equipment and tech, or consumer goods. These are just two examples. You could have any point along this curve. This is just a choice. This is your choice. I think the book talks about a choice that a student makes between studying for one exam or the other. Right? Your choice for spending your time playing a game, studying, reading, watching TV. Right? Any choice that you have to make, all this line is showing you is the choice that you make and how much you're giving up of something else. So note here, let's kind of be really clear about what this means. I'm going to draw an arrow from A and B to the two axes. So from here, let's draw an arrow there and an arrow there. And we're going to call this cap A. I capitalize that so it looks readable. So there's the amount of consumer goods we've chosen. Then down there, I'm going to put con A, the level of consumer goods. Do the same thing for B, and then we can do some kind of analysis here. We'll call this one cap B and con B. This, I think, is going to be what's coming up is it's going to be a question on our midterm. So this is something we need to grasp here. So let me do my best to explain this after putting this down here. I'm going to draw another dot here, but I'm going to make this one freely floating. Don't draw it. And just show you something. Here, this represents a society that's using all of its people, all of its resources, everything to making machinery and tech. This is a society that's choosing not to do any tech, any machinery, and only make consumer goods. So this is a country specializing in one thing. And if I had another dot here to represent another country, it's specializing in something else. Notice that this country is making a choice, either A or B, between making more capital or more consumer goods. Now, by making a choice, by choosing to play video games and not study, by choosing to go to class and not go to work. So you've chosen to come to class. Let's say you could have gotten a shift today. What's your opportunity cost of coming to class today? Not working, and how would you quantify that? Yeah, so how much money you make per hour, right? And the hours that you missed. So let's say you missed an hour, you make 15 an hour. The opportunity cost of coming to class was more or less 15 bucks, right? For every choice, you have to give up something else. So notice here, we have a country that decides, like the United States has, to really specialize when we're exporting things. We export things that are very tech savvy, that are either very complicated machinery, very complicated aircraft, very complicated electronics. Now, yes, I know we also export. I have a buddy who exports walnuts when he can even get a container to export them. So yes, we make other things, but note here at point A, let's say we're doing this as a society over time, and we really have moved from farming goods to more tech goods. So draw that arrow. We've moved from B to A as a country over time. We'll say USA. So USA has moved from B to A over time. We have gained what? Let me make some segments here. So add here a line. Do you see how I'm doing a double arrow line segment there, line segment there? And I'll call that line segment between cap A and cap B. We call that line segment 1. And between con A and con B, consider that line segment 2. What was gained and what was lost? In that movement, what was gained and what was lost? Tell me in numbers. Over time, the United States moving from point B to point A, we have gained. What do you see along the y-axis? What's happened?
Increase in capital.
Yeah, so we made more capital goods. Notice, so all this is representing on any graph right here is that's zero down here, and it's going off until infinity. So I'm not putting numbers here, but I could say $2 trillion worth of capital goods up to $10 trillion in capital goods. So we're making more capital goods. What have we given up? Consumer goods. So this area, so write this out. This is how I'm going to phrase the test question. Con A to con B is what we have a very specific name for this, and this is opportunity cost. What you've given up to come here. I'm sorry. What we have given up as a country to make more capital goods. What have you given up to come to class would be your opportunity cost for coming here today. Questions, because it's going to get a little bit more complicated as we go. We got that so far? Any questions, clarifying? All right. I'm gonna have you guys talk to each other to check with each other, make sure everyone understands in a second here. Now, to add to this, we have other points here. So another point would be a dot inside the circle, or inside the curve, I should say. So make a dot down here, label that C. Notice what that outside line is representing. It's what we're capable of producing if we're using all of our resources effectively. If we fall into war, if there's a major natural disaster, if there's a major economic depression, that's what C would represent. So either it's inefficiency, we're not using everything, which would be a recession, or underemployment, or some kind of natural disaster that's caused that. Both Russia and Ukraine are now somewhere within their production possibilities frontier. They're both, because they're engaging in war, aren't using their resources for productive means, they're using them to destroy each other, and therefore they're not out on the outside of their curve. Huge opportunity cost for going to war. Now, almost lastly, I'm going to make another point way out here, outside of the curve. I'm going to call this point D. Now notice what I want you to write in your notes. Parts outside of the curve are currently unattainable. The only things that are attainable are choice along that production possibilities frontier. A, B, or anything along that bowed line. Anything inside, we're in a recession, we're not efficient. Anything outside, we're not capable of producing right now. But what are those three things that allow us to produce more things? Look at your notes. What are the three things that allow us to produce more? LLK. So here's in the future. So write this out if you would under here. In the future, more LLK, and I'm going to add something, and productivity. So as we have more land resources that we're using, either mining, drilling for more resources, using more renewable resources, then that curve can grow out, can make more stuff. As we get more people and we increase people's what? What's that three-letter acronym I had there? Not only more workers, but the workers KSAs, right? That curve moves out in the future. As we make more capital and use that capital, this moves out. But just as importantly, as we become more productive, as we become more efficient in how we use resources, grows that curve outside. Now, I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to let you out a little bit early. So I don't want to jump to something that's going to take more of our time that I don't have to really fight off at this time. There is a caveat here. And that caveat means an exception. So right now, we can't produce at point B. But do we live in a state, I'm going to give you a fancy economic word, do we live in a state of autarky? Do we live in a country that doesn't trade with other nations, or do we trade with other nations? Do we buy things that are imported? Do we sell things overseas? That's not us. All right, this is showing an economy that's completely closed off. Does that economy even exist on our planet anymore? I mean, not even North Korea, right? The most isolated nation on the planet, it still cheats and gets stuff from China and Russia. Right? There's no country that operates like this anymore because we've all joined together through international trade. What that means is that if you are very specialized in one type of good and really good at doing that thing, kind of like what I'm asking you guys in the beginning of the class, what are you going to be really good at? Now, let me digress here for a second. What is it? Who cares? Why did I ask about what are you going to be really good at? What are you going to specialize in? What does that mean to you in your life? Answer this. That's what you're trying to do. Right, which to bring you what? Yeah. Bring you productivity? But okay, but put it in terms of your life. Like, why do you care? Why are you doing this college thing and going in that direction? What's it going to bring you? Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Money and maybe some fulfillment, right? Now, let's say you didn't specialize. What's your income going to be? More or less? It's going to be less, right? Same holds true for countries, right? So if you specialize more and make more money, you can have more stuff and more experiences and more travel, right? I think that's what maybe you're going for. A nation as well as it specializes in something and allows other, you're not specializing in everything, right? When you guys wrote down what you're specializing in, you did not write down, I'm going to be great at everything. If you did, we need a therapist for you, right? That's not a good personality trait, nor is it attainable. So just like that, you are going to specialize in one thing, and that's going to enable you to work with other people who specialize in something else to get more for everybody. Nations are the same. Nations specialize in certain things, other nations specialize in certain things, and then when they trade with one another, so here's the payoff, they can consume at point B. When we make really good, and moral judgments aside here, really good military equipment, we're the largest seller of military equipment on the planet. We make really good military equipment, aircraft, high tech, and then we buy consumer goods. If you've noticed your clothes, if you look at those tags in your clothes, or a lot of the goods you buy at the store, they're made somewhere else. If we make what we make and they would make what they make and we trade, you can consume more than you can produce. Just like what your goal is to specialize in something, have other people specialize in something else, and then not live in that traditional economy. Because the traditional economy that you and I want to live in is one where we're only going to be able to get what we can produce or acquire from people close by. By specializing in something and allowing others to specialize in other areas, it allows us all to live beyond our means. And that, I guess, is what macroeconomics is about. It's about people's drive to gain more material things that hopefully bring us more happiness. And that's a wrap. Have a great day, everyone. What are you going to do for me next class? Read the articles. All right, have a great day.